Remedy's business plan confuses me. I'm a diehard fan of their games, but the story of FBC Firebreak is a head-scratcher. What I mean by that is I don't know how they looked at what they had and thought, this will be a sustainable, financially successful, and competitive entry in today's gaming market. Even after this newest patch, we're seeing headlines like this, with Remedy issuing a profit warning for shareholders, stating that they would eat a non-cash impairment of 14.9 million euros. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the background, current state, and future prospects for FBC Firebreak. I like Mike Kayada. He seems like a super down-to-earth guy, and you can tell that he and his team truly care about improving their game and listening to their fans. He gives off Sean Murray vibes. I mean in that he seems like a developer first and public speaker second.
Am I like slamming it in your face?
The rewinding back, that was great.
Oh, yeah.
That was very smooth.
But we are getting there and we are on track and we cannot wait to share this with you all. Okay.
There's something.
Okay.
That was it.
All right.
Like energy, yet like so this is must feel for like a great director when he sees it.
He comes from a narrative design background with live games, and Firebreak was his first project with Remedy. I think that whether it was through time, lore, and/or manpower constraints, Mike and his team were given a Herculean task with making this game. Before I delve into why, let's talk about where we started and where we are now. For context, I've played on my PC, so any technical issues I've had are unique to that platform.
Hello, fellow Bureau employees. Have you tried leaving the office for a cigarette break recently?
FBC Firebreak released on June 17th, 2025, with a matchmaking hotfix for Steam that came that same day. Their first patch was 3 days later, which made some notable changes. Sample and lost asset resources for upgrades and cosmetic unlocks were easier to see. They sped up unlock progression and they quickened our ability to play other jobs by making Clearance 3, the full breadth of the level, playable right away, instead of previously having to play different lengths of the same mission 3 times. They shifted the unlocks around to separate cosmetics and essential gear, which didn't seem to matter that much as they sped up how everything was unlocked anyway. On the 26th of June, Remedy announced some good news in that they crossed the milestone for over 1 million players across all platforms, and they reminded us that they were continually working on the game. July 1st brought patch 1.3, which added things like tutorial videos, a swivel cannon health boost, and perk economy changes so that certain tier 3 perks were more readily obtainable. Note that perks were so confusing for some players that Remedy needed to put out a multi-paragraph announcement just to explain how their resonance system works 3 days prior to this patch. Patch 1.4 on July 15th brought mainly audio and UI improvements, alongside several bug and stability fixes. On the 18th of July, Remedy gave an introspective breakdown of what's missing from the game, and they hinted at where they were focusing on leading up to this major September update and beyond. They acknowledged key sticking points for players, such as the need for better tutorialization, repetitive objectives, and the anemic content offering of 5 playable levels. Patch 1.5 brought enemy spawn time changes, improved behaviors, and more tweaks and bug fixes, but also gave us an invincible Sticky Ricky. Oops. That was quickly fixed. It should be said that with each patch came several network, onboarding menu, HUD, audio, performance, and visual improvements and fixes. These changes, alongside Remedy's constant communication, which continues to hold true, were signs of good faith from the devs to say that they were ready for the long haul in creating a quality experience for their fans. Which leads us to this first major update, Breakpoint. It brought a lot to the table, including, but not limited to, 4 returning enemies from control, 5 if you count the mold turret, but I see that as more environmental. Those enemies are the mold hosts, the Hiss Rangers airborne, and the Hiss demolition experts. We got a sorely needed new job, a tutorial level, more videos, and a better introductory flow for people opening the game for the first time. New cosmetic sprays and voice packs, including an exotic tier. That has some cool items in it with its own currency. I'll get to that. 3 new weapons and 3 new grenade types. Switch from custom level and corruption selection to a 40k Dark Tide style offering of jobs that you pick from. This probably helped decrease matchmaking wait times. Better visibility of ammo stations and showers. Crisis kit and augment improvements and tuning. New side objectives, which is very welcome. Various general quality of life improvements and changes to status effects. A complete economy revamp, which new players will never know has happened, which includes no more tiered quality of guns or crisis kits. All the kits, weapons, and grenades are immediately accessible and at their full power now. A currency overhaul from the previous 6 collectible types down to 4. Instead of the 5 types of research, 1 from each mission, you now collect parts, intel, and samples to upgrade perks and unlock cosmetics. Instead of lost asset binders and bags, we now have Trace, a highly elusive currency for the previously mentioned exotic tier of unlocks. Trace can currently only be found as potential drops from powerful enemies or cleansing corrupted items on levels that have it. For perspective, I normally play on hard, and I've seen Trace drop about 6 times in over 10 hours of playtime. Each exotic item is a minimum of 5 Trace. Oof, so that, it feels quite stingy at the time of writing this, but I expect a patch to hopefully increase Trace drop rate in the future. And finally, a roadmap for 2 major new updates. One in November, promising in-game voice chat, a roguelike mode, and control-themed armor sets. That sounds pretty awesome. The other update is planned for March of 2026, and it includes a new crisis kit and kit synergy improvements. Not sure what that means, but interesting. No sign of new proper jobs on this roadmap, which is a little concerning, even with the announced roguelike mode alluding to added gameplay variety. They stated that even more updates would be communicated later. So that's quite a lot, and all for free, which is highly commendable. So I have to give Remedy respect for that. Initially, they did want to charge for the new cosmetic requisitions as shown in this old roadmap, but my theory is that the mixed reception and dwindling player numbers required Remedy to pivot, making the exotic requisition free as a sign of goodwill for the established fan base. That's pure speculation on my part though, so take that for a grain of salt. So besides the obvious financial reasons, why do I harbor skepticism when I think of this game? Why do I still feel concerned for the developers that need to fight this uphill battle that is keeping this game going? And why do I feel like this game could be scrapped at any time for them to go back to the drawing board? I have some suspicions as to why. After the release of Quantum Break, Remedy was in an awkward position. For the health of the company, it was not sustainable to take several years on big gambles that may or may not financially pay off. They were taking steps to turn themselves into a 3-game studio. It's exactly what it sounds like, working on 3 different projects at a time at different stages of development. They wanted something releasing each year. The company was taken public in 2017, for better or for worse, opening up investments from shareholders to raise the capital to implement this plan. They've kept to this to a T. Control in 2019, its 2 expansions in 2020, Alan Wake Remastered in 2021, Crossfire X single player in 2022. Alan Wake 2, 2023, its 2 expansions the next year, and finally, FBC Firebreak 2025. The 3-game studio is difficult to establish for obvious reasons. Technical and creative demands are spread across several people, each working with different workflows on different projects. And the team sizes, they vary. Financial sustainability is always top of mind as those team sizes grow. Remedy has their big picture, single player heavy hitter experiences, such as the upcoming Control 2 and Max Payne 1 and 2 remake, alongside Rockstar. But they also wanted to branch out to other experiences in these rich worlds that they've built. Fair enough. Remedy now has over 350 employees, and it's expected that most of their talent is going towards those bigger projects. Though we don't know exact numbers, we know through their marketing, self-published no less, that FBC Firebreak's team was a smaller one.
How many people are on the core Firebreak team?
3.
This is getting political. Well, who's core?
Exactly. I don't know. I have no idea.
I think we're right. It's interesting because of course, like as a game goes on, it fluctuates. Like during you know when we were conceiving the game, it was like a couple of us, and then like at the height of production, I think we maxed out like between 40 and 50, and then we're kind of coming back down a little bit now, and then depending on like our update schedule, everything that'll go up and down. Or of course, when you start adding external development partners and QA testers, all these other things. Of course, like I think our credits will make it look like we had just thousands of people working on this, but really not so many.
They acted almost like an underdog with limited resources, maxed out between 40 or 50 people at the height of their production. Their philosophy was described as a humble experience that wanted to avoid things like FOMO-based timed events and daily check-ins. But did all departments at Remedy see the vision of their game consistently across the board? When I see Remedy's upper management team talk about FBC Firebreak and compare that to the philosophy of the development team, it seems like I'm watching the testimonies in Rashomon. They're inconsistent. The game wasn't charged as a premium product, $40 American for the base game. Listen to how Mike talks about the game. He talks like an indie developer that's happy to just be there.
Like, maybe I want to play a game like Firebreak, but also, like, are we really going to say, like, well, Firebreak is the end-all, be-all, best game, compete for every single second of your time, and if you don't give it to us, then we're going to punish you? It's just, there's something about it, like, even just as a gamer that feels wrong, because this isn't what Remedy normally does, and we know that we have a lot to prove. We have, like, a humble experience, like, with a humble team. We're trying to come out and say, look, we believe in this and we do believe in it, but at the end of the day, it's our first time doing something like this. It's a crowded space. There's a million people who have been iterating this type of game for what feels like 10,000 years. So for us, like, we just said, hey, like, if we're going to do this, we don't want to pressure people. We just want to put it in many people's hands as possible, make it fun. And if they play it for 5 hours and put it away for 6 months, they should feel like they don't log back in and suddenly see 10,000 different things and everything has changed. And oh my gosh, what did I miss out on? Whatever. And then say, I'm never touching this again because I don't have time in my 1 hour a day to game to go back and unpack what's not there or to feel like I've missed something. And to me, honestly, that's just how I feel as a gamer. And so we just were like, well, let's just like respond to that for everybody.
As Mayada mentioned, the devs didn't want to push people to rush to their game. You could pick it up for a few hours, put it down, go back to it a while later, and then not worry about missing anything, respecting your players' time. Now listen to CEO Tiro Virtala talk about the game during their second quarter 2025 investor stream.
Sales-wise, as I said, the launch was disappointing. As the game was day one on PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass, we expected PC and especially Steam to be the channel where most of the consumer sales would happen. On Steam, the launch clearly underperformed. Players overall expected more playable content. On top of that, our early gated mission structure and progression system barred players from having the full job experience fast enough and seeing everything the game has to offer. So the way we presented content for the players made also the game look smaller than it is.
There's actually been a big update on Virtala, but we're going to leave that till closer to the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. He states that they were disappointed with the game's sales, but did they bother to look at other successful examples of the genre? I understand that comparison is the thief of joy, but these things need to be studied so that your game can stand out in a competitive industry, especially if you have shareholders. I know it's a little unfair, but I want to do a bit of comparison with what else is out there, and hopefully we'll see a common thread here. I think it's hard not to see some Helldivers 2, Left 4 Dead, Vermintide, Darktide, Destiny, and as Mike says, Power Wash Simulator, I guess, energy in there.
For example, like Power Wash Simulator, oddly.
Oh.
Which sounds it sounds a little bit weird, but actually one of the first tools we ever worked on was trying to figure out how to create a pressure washer, which we really failed at, by the way. Hence why instead we were like, okay, now just throw a gigantic blob of water at things instead of trying to be so precise.
FBC Firebreak had 50 people at its peak of development and began work on it in 2021. 4 years for those mathematicians out there. They were mid-pandemic during this time, which is an important factor to consider. Was it their first self-published game? Yes. Was it their first multiplayer game? Also yes. So what was there at release? Remedy's output upon release was 5 missions that take 15 to 20 minutes to complete on normal difficulty. Many players complained that they had gone through all of the content in 2 to 3 hours. There were the arguably very cool 3 crisis kits, 6 weapons and 3 grenades, as well as new perks, cosmetics, voice packs, and sprays to unlock. Helldivers 2, bigger game of course, had 20 devs working on it at first, and that number expanded to 100 people by its release. It took 8 years to develop, and it's arguably one of Sony's only successful live service games. At launch, there were approximately 10 variations of missions across 2 enemy factions, several planets, 49 weapon types, 10 grenade types, and 10 difficulty levels. This doesn't include the missions that you see early on in the game that introduce new enemy types, or that show up as secondary objectives later, such as kill the Brood Commander or upload escape pod data. The Left 4 Dead team grew to an estimated 110 people during its production. The game was developed in 3 years. They released with 4 acts, yes, but each act had 5 missions going from safe room to safe room, so it felt longer. Fat Shark, the makers of Vermintide 1 and 2, and 40K Darktide, don't have exact dev team numbers, but as of 2025, they have about 180 staffers. Vermintide 1 took 2.5 years to develop. Vermintide 2 came out 3 years later, so it had at least the same dev time, although that isn't confirmed. And Darktide took 5 years to develop. Vermintide 1 and 2 both had 13 missions across 3 acts. Darktide had 6 zones, which are the unique tile sets where the levels take place. Each of those has 1 to 4 scenarios on it. Destiny, another game, had a few hundred people working on it over 7 years from concept to release. Big game. It had a hub area, 4 zones to explore, a campaign with over 20 missions across those zones, 3 enemy factions, a raid, 5 strikes, 17 exotic weapons, and a PvP mode. A lot of content. A massive undertaking to be sure, and people still got bored of playing those missions over and over again. Am I going to compare Destiny with FBC Firebreak? Absolutely not. They are 2 completely different games. I'm just trying to show how much content it takes to maintain interest of players, and how big the dev team sizes usually need to be for these sorts of games. Did these games have issues at release and beyond? Yes. Fans were disappointed with Darktide especially. It had a mixed reception that led to a high player drop-off due to performance issues, bad itemization, and a lackluster story, to name a few. It comes with the territory for these games to be a broken ship being repaired as they're set out to sea. But unlike FBC Firebreak, the bones of a core experience were already there for those other games. Imagine if Destiny had only strike missions, or if Left 4 Dead shipped with 1 to 2 acts. The core gameplay could be the coolest thing you've ever seen, but it would still disappoint people. The cores of these other games kept players coming back, and it showed in the player counts. All the normal problems with live service games were there, but there were enough things to do to keep players interested while people waited for the next update. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Mike Kayada certainly understood the scope of how the game could perform by how he talked about it. Very humbly. But I don't think any of the upper management realized what it takes to create a multiplayer live service game. If you aren't going to go in on what makes these kinds of games successful, why make the game at all? The ignorance of the upper management shows in not only their poor delegation of staff, but also their choice to ship a game that was clearly underbaked, even for live action game standards.
Coming back to the launch, were all the issues in the FBC Firebreak launch a surprise to you, or was there another reason not to reschedule the launch?
Well, we went through the identified issues, especially on the early phases. On the early phases of the game, we clearly had indications that there were improvement needs in the game. We were improving many parts. As I said, we did not, in a way, correctly identify the importance and severity of some of these things. And we made in the management evaluation that we had a good game in our hands and it was ready for launch. And that was the basis for the decision. But overall, we saw also based on the user feedback when players had been playing the game a bit more that we had a good experience in our hands.
Something very fitting is a quote from Chet Falizek, co-lead of Left 4 Dead. This was an anecdote of a conversation he had with Gabe Newell before a poorly received playtest for Left 4 Dead right before it released. And quote, "Gabe just asked me very seriously, why don't I just play Counter-Strike instead? That's working." And I thought he was joking, like, ha ha ha, but then he made me watch him play it. He made me sit in his office and watch and play it. He says, "No, seriously, this is every single one of your customers asking this question right now. What do you tell them?" Like, fuck, good question, end quote. Another hurdle for Remedy to tackle for FBC Firebreak was breaking away from how they were successful up until this point. Like Sean Bean playing the bad guy, Jim Carrey as the goofball, or Matthew McConaughey in a rom-com, Remedy was typecast as strictly the narrative-first, single-player, third-person action game company. Deep, cerebral, rich lore with excellent writing, deadly serious or horrifying one moment, and laugh out loud silly the next. Their efforts to break away from the system with their mobile game Agents of Storm and single-player mode for Crossfire X and HD, contracted out by South Korean dev Smilegate, did not bear fruit. Remedy's own rich stories are a strong part of what keeps their fans coming back again and again. The RCU, Remedy Connected Universe, for those who don't know, spans across their games and it connects all of the branching narratives. Remedy fans go wild with speculation and discussion about these characters, their origins, and the paranatural phenomena pouring from these acutely realized worlds. As a fan of Remedy and the RCU, I'm part of the problem. We can get a little obsessive at times in our speculation, and we drink the Kool-Aid wearing our tinfoil hats a little too much, if you catch my drift. Lo and behold, it's one of the biggest questions people were asking up until FBC Firebreak's release. How have you integrated the stories you're known for into this game? Will we see enter your favorite character here in the game? Where's the lore hidden? What has changed with this sector? And so on and so forth.
How much, because I know there's not going to be like big cutscenes or anything, but like how are you trying to tell story? Like how much story are you trickling in throughout?
Yeah, how deep is that well gonna go? And like the things that you couldn't necessarily pull in, like I'm hoping for a Dr. Darling cameo or something, you know.
Well, I guess to that end, I'll say like, how deep is it gonna go? Let's see.
Is there a magical balance like that you considered when you go into something like FBC and you're like, well, I want to make a multiplayer game. I love storytelling and I love the happenstance storytelling that happens in those games. Is there like a magical chemistry sort of science thing you've figured out to be able to make those things work and happen in a way that, you know, could benefit an artistic touch?
For a game like Firebreak, you know, we are still very narratively rich in the sense of space, right? Like that side of narrative, like we still embrace very, very, very heavily. But the thing is that when players jump into that space, they are that timeline.
So Remedy is behind big titles, you know, obviously Alan Wake, Control. Sure. How does Remedy plan to use Firebreak to add to this sort of shared universe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's a tricky one for us in a sense.
Now we're here talking about FBC Firebreak, but can you tell us anything, any sort of update on the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes, right?
Oh man. That is completely redacted.
With the exception of some main menu dialogue between unseen characters Hank and Jerry, and some documents during loading screens, there is no new lore for RCU fans to really dig into. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Game developers absolutely should be allowed to branch out to new types of projects across different genres. It keeps things fresh and exciting, especially for Remedy veterans such as lead designer Anssi Haitiainen. Anssi Haitiainen. Fuck. This is what he had to say.
I've been a designer of sort at Remedy for a quarter of a century now, and I personally play multiplayer games much more myself, so it's really nice to finally be actually designing a multiplayer game.
At the same time, the developers shouldn't be surprised when fans ask those sorts of questions about lore integration, or get disappointed when loose story elements aren't included in the gameplay. It might have benefited this game for the narrative team to have a closer hand in it at the very least. On a positive note, it does seem that Remedy has been getting better in marrying their small projects with the worlds of their larger ones. Unlike the previously mentioned Agents of Storm and Crossfire X, FBC Firebreak seems closer to the mark for feeling properly folded into Remedy's library of projects. It has been said that first impressions are everything, and that rings true for multiplayer games. FBC Firebreak's rough first impression is well documented. Is there a fun game in here somewhere? Yes. Is it impossible to bring players back and new players in if you leave a bad first impression to gamers? No. There are many things that you can do to strengthen the experience, but it will result in an unnecessary uphill battle for the developers to win people back.
I mean, we should have done better, we know, but then again, this is always going to be a game that will keep, building update by update, making it bigger, making it better, adding in more interesting things. So,
and one of the really great things is the minute that you put that out to the world, everything that you're hearing is the truth. It's how to actually make the game better. It's getting out of your head and thinking about what other people want. And that's what unlocked for us the minute that we launched the game. And it really has driven the team. Like, actually, people are even more motivated because they say, oh, right, this is what we should be doing. This is how we can fix things and how we can make things better. And that's what's really driven most of the update.
FBC Firebreak's story mirrors somewhat to that of No Man's Sky and developers Hello Games. A small team with a rough launch and mixed to negative reviews. Hello Games kept working on No Man's Sky post-launch and never charged a penny for DLC. The Internet Historian has a great video on this called The Engoodening of No Man's Sky, which you should check out.
To be super clear, No Man's Sky is not that. Here's the full and proper multiplayer experience. Ringed planets, third-person mode, character customization, a galactic atlas on an external website for the community, vast overhauls to base building and crafting and resources.
To this day, there are over 30 totally free major updates to the game, and this generous gesture of goodwill was met with high praise from players, of course. Many people returned to No Man's Sky, and all of the enticing new features and experiences brought even more new players to purchase the game. This is a top-tier move. Not only did this massive push of free content reinstate good faith with their player base, it also flooded Hello Games with awards and accolades that will ultimately lead to positive buzz for the next title they release, Light No Fire. So FBC Firebreak should do the same thing, and Remedy will see the same success, right? I see two problems with this. No Man's Sky can update in many more ways. New biomes, new creatures, weather phenomena, flotilla ships, mechs, rovers, underwater base building, etc. Being a universe-spanning new IP allows that sort of freedom to build upon. Remedy has finite lore limitations that they need to adhere to. Even being set in a place as dynamic as the shifting halls of the oldest house, the people you play as are tasked with cleaning up the areas we've already seen in Control, even if those areas have changed a little bit. Because of the smaller scale, it seems unlikely that FBC Firebreak will be able to explore something, like a hiss-infected threshold we've yet to see that needs, to be cleansed before it spreads to that reality like it did ours. That seems like an interesting concept. It seems like the FBC Firebreak team is set on sticking to reusing most of its assets from Control, except for the one new enemy type. Would the remaining hiss mold, not mutate a little more over 6 years? I don't know. I would have loved to have played as a pre-hiss invasion ranger squad entering different thresholds for the first time, discovering entirely new realities, charting them and fighting untold horrors through them. But that leads into our second problem with following Hello Games' footsteps. Remedy doesn't have the same runway to drop new updates that Hello Games did. Hello Games has had the fortunate position of being able to release free updates for No Man's Sky since 2016. That's 9 years. Although it was critically panned on release, it still sold a crap load. Even with people refunding the game made enough money and the team was small enough to push those updates out one after another. The stories of Remedy games are grounded in the times that they are released. The experiment that breaks time in Quantum Break takes place in the same year, 2016. In Alan Wake 2, it tells us that he's been trapped in the dark place for 13 years. It released 13 years after Alan Wake 1.
You've been missing for 13 years. 13.
FBC Firebreak itself tells us that they've been on cleanup duty for 6 years. Control released, you got it, 6 years ago.
That's right. We're all trapped inside with our co-workers, and have been for about 6 years now. Dang it.
Following that logic, it seems that Remedy doesn't have all that long to work on FBC Firebreak. About as long as it will take for Control 2 to come out, whenever that will be, as most fans will have moved on. Spoiler alert, we see the lockdown lifted in the few teases we've had of Control 2, and I would hope that the Hiss have been taken care of by Jesse and the Firebreakers by then. That sounds like a good band name, actually. I wouldn't mind seeing a new enemy in the sequel, other than the Hiss. By then, it's likely that the Firebreak dev team will be moved on to their next project. Remedy's 3-game studio structure doesn't seem to fit long stretches of support. Otherwise, the overarching RCU through line would be kind of tripping over itself, if that makes sense. If the Firebreak team were to continue working on the game past the release of Remedy's upcoming titles, it would be pretty cool, pretty interesting to see the events of those games reflected in any future updates for this game. We got off track there, sorry, but back to our first impressions. Why was this game so poorly received at launch? Tutorials in FBC Firebreak were a bit of an issue upon release, to put it mildly. Lots of unanswered questions such as, what does resonance mean? Fire actually buffs the Hiss? You can upgrade the perks? How do I get my perks to level 3? What does the pink stuff do? What do the ducks mean? What is clearance level 6? Is that extreme difficulty with full corruption? Etc., etc. With this newest patch, the explanation of core systems has gotten much better.
We're really trying to tackle and improve the onboarding. There's a brand new tutorial mission that explains the game systems, explains crisis kits, and then we've made other changes as well that hopefully make it a smoother experience, especially for new players.
But there's still room for improvement, such as giving certain perks concrete numbers and percentages for greater detail when choosing your loadouts. Also, don't touch the black rock launch. Just shoot the corrupted item with the black. Oh, fuck. The weapon balancing is not great in FBC Firebreak. Pre-Breakpoint patch, it would be a rarity if I saw anyone using anything other than the Lewis gun. Now I see a few secondary fire scattergun folks and semi-auto rifle users out there. But some of the weapons, notably the bolt-action rifle and the double-barrel shotgun, are outclassed by the constantly firing weapons that have a higher chance of proccing those elemental and staggering effects based on their sheer output. You might be saying, but Neil, the double barrel, just get quick reload on the shotgun. Quick reload also benefits the Lewis gun and the scatter gun, and they can kill big crowds in a single sweep, unlike the double barrel, so why wouldn't I pick them, you know? I personally think these base guns need another look for proper balancing. Nerfing guns in PvE games never really made sense to me, so I was thinking I would love to hear some suggestions for how to buff those other weapons. Perhaps a coin shot, sawed-off shotgun that has a ridiculous spread, or even 2 sawed-off shotguns, 1 in each hand. That'd be pretty cool. Or get Remedy goofy with it, you know? Do a 6-barrel shotgun, or use the chain super shotgun model like in Doom Eternal, something like that. I think it would be interesting to have the bolt-action rifle pierce even better by being able to shoot through the Hiss Breaker's front armor, making it a more viable choice, you know, as other weapons can kill pretty quick with shock and water rounds. The Lewis gun feels iconically from Control, some of the others not so much. But this update was a step in the right direction. Hopefully we'll get another scope for the semi-auto rifle. More unique feeling slapdash style guns like the scattergun would be amazing. I love that gun. I spoke briefly about this earlier, but it would have been fun to see some more unique mutations of the Hiss after 6 years than just the Hiss Breaker, which I realized through a making of YouTube video. It's actually a corrupted Firebreaker, hence the name. I didn't connect the dots there.
This is actually a Hiss that you haven't seen before Firebreak, mostly because that's actually a member of Firebreak who has very unfortunately succumbed to the Hiss resonance.
I was also a little disappointed to see only returning enemies in the new major update instead of some never-before-seen threats. I understand that this can be chalked up to dev team size limitations. You know, first you have to concept and build enemies that fit the aesthetic. And then you have to animate them, make sure they have a unique move set and fighting style, not stepping on the toes of what Control established. That's no easy feat. but it would help the game feel less derivative and stand on its own a bit more. The gameplay has several fun elements like the crisis kits and many weak points, including the manual repair minigame. Clicking 2 buttons back and forth quickly to repair something or put out fires, that's fine, but we do it a lot when we play the game. I'd rather not give up a perk slot or 3 just to have to do that manual repairing less. I'd much prefer additional mini games based on the task being completed, whatever that may look like. One mini game for putting out fires, one for collecting ammo, one for the actual repairing, and then maybe one for setting up those portable chillers and the torches. Maybe a rotating lockpick style mini game or like a rhythm game. Variety is the spice of life. You can kind of go anywhere you want with that. Mission and objective design was another area that I think felt a little lacking. Some strong levels in my mind are Hot Fix and Paper Chase. These missions feel strong environmentally, and they allow each crisis kit to shine. Boss battle and Paper Chase is a joint effort, and the sticky notes are easily destroyed by the water zap combo. Hot Fix, I like it because it has something for everyone to do. There's the water cooling, the charging of the batteries, and the whacking inside of the fans with the wrench. And the massive environmental blast from the furnace. I feel like that's really exciting to play around. My least favorite levels are Freezer Duty and Frequency Shift. Both are quite lopsided in choosing the jump kit and fix kit respectfully. In Frequency Shift, the fix kit repairs the many transmitters and cables very quickly. In Freezer Duty, the jump kit makes quick work of the portable heaters and thrives in the verticality of the mission. Ground Control has an interesting design, but the radiated orbs gathering and the finale felt a little tedious and unexciting, which the devs they directly addressed that in the new update by reducing the rad damage and the orb requirements. I also wish that there was a new boss, kind of akin to Mold 1 from Control in the new update, but instead we are mixing batches of a mold pesticide with colored barrels while fighting normal enemies we've seen before. I do really enjoy the design of the 3 zones for the new mission, but I do wish that finale was a little bit more inspired. I firmly believe that the players are the lifeblood to any cooperative PvE shooter, and here I think is where FBC Firebreak's biggest problems lay. Word of mouth is critical, and if you have all of the aforementioned issues with a shaky core content offering, players can tell right away. This graph that CEO Tiro Vertala showed in their Q2 update reflected the painful 17% positive review share on launch date. That's from Steam. That the game simply was not ready. I also really dislike this chart because it gives you a share of positive daily user reviews on Steam during the first week, but it doesn't account for the massive player drop-offs also seen in that first week. So the higher numbers that you see, like the 75, 76%, 81%, those are from a much smaller amount of people that are more likely diehard Remedy fans. So I really don't like this graph. Unless you were playing on Game Pass or PS Plus, what was on offer felt like a ripoff for the price. It showed in the Steam player count as that number peaked on release day at 1,992 players, with a small bump of 200 to 300 people with this new September update. Like most people, I finished all missions at launch in under 3 to 4 hours. I was able to get all of the achievements, unlock all of the perks, and complete all of the requisitions in less than 15 hours. Many players also thought higher difficulty levels were a little too easy at launch, which that didn't really help the shelf life either. Another bad taste left in players' mouths was that this offering felt even smaller because of that trickle out play 3 time level progression that the game had at launch that we mentioned before. That's thankfully fixed as of today. I have a few thoughts as to why this new September update isn't bringing in enough new fans, nor doing a good enough job of retaining returning players. First is the slower than average update cadence compared to the other games. That can't really be helped with smaller teams, but 3 months is a long time for a multiplayer live service game. Hate to keep bringing Helldivers 2 back into this, but that's why they have a new war bond every month. Players, they lose attention very easily. The second problem for Remedy is choosing what to prioritize with each new update. Because they need an injection of new players to keep the game afloat at this point, They are stuck with heavily focusing on reworking the onboarding experience as opposed to pleasing current players with strong waves of new content offerings. If certain things like the research economy, perk progression, requisition tuning, tutorialization, mission board system, etc., were hashed out by Remedy and finalized earlier in the game's development, it would have left them more room to focus on bringing new content to the established player base, and they would have had a much stronger jumping off point. As a result of what's actually happened, all of those new onboarding changes are redundant, I would say, to the game's most loyal backers, people who have already been playing it for a bit. Remedy was stuck playing catch up. Yes, the new update brought all that welcome new content, but the majority of the patching, hot fixing, and major updating on core systems isn't likely what you want to spend your dev bandwidth on if you're Remedy. Some changes based on player feedback are justified, yeah, sure, but a good amount of the patches and a decent chunk of the Breakpoint update arguably should have been finalized before putting the game in the hands of players, especially the multiple research economy changes that happened like 3 times. This game was not marketed as an early access game, but a full standalone title. Also, the fact that in-game voice chat wasn't included at release, that's a big problem. We'll say that's a very big problem for a multiplayer game. The update. Remedy wanted to give players a welcoming experience back to the game with this new update. The new addition of secondary objectives was a welcome break from the monotony, even though the objectives themselves are a little uninspired. You know, put boxes in a circle, put heaters in a circle, kill the hiss, etc. I wish that Remedy had more time to playtest this update, because there were some fundamental issues, namely the spawn rate of enemies. Players would get stuck in their spawns even on lower difficulties. You would be killing one group and hear 3 more groups spawning in at a time, with no end to the spawning of the enemies in sight. Before you say, you just need to get good, Neil. The devs themselves acknowledged the issue. It made certain objectives frustratingly unplayable, as full squads of players would run out of ammo, holding out in a safe room or other choke point. Or, adversely, they would immediately get melted by enemies as they made a break for the next objective. The Rangers and Airborne Rangers, 2 of the returning enemy types, were very bullet spongy and dealt a ton of damage with laser accuracy. There's a few funny screenshots out there of just the swarms of them. The Rangers and spawn rates were hot fixed 2 days later, but even those 2 days can turn away players. Other little bugs showed up, like the skins not showing up correctly on their requisition pages, or some of the new weapon mods not working as intended, or trace drops being almost non-existent. Some things with the update are more odd than they are annoying, such as adding those 3 new weapons to the game, but then not having any skins to collect for them, or having the new level, but not having a tutorial puppet video for it, after promising better tutorialization. That's stuff I expect will come in a future update if they have more. But on the whole, most fans agree that the free, key to remember, Breakpoint update has been a step in the right direction for Firebreak. It still remains to be seen if the game will be sunset in the near future or not, but I am very glad that Kayada and his team are trying to steer the ship back on course. Things that work, ideas, and closing thoughts. I feel like I've been overly negative to this game the entire video, so I want to round it out by taking a look at some things that work, some general ideas I have, and generally looking towards the future of the game. The positives. It seems like Remedy is close to finalizing their progression and economic systems in this game. So I'm guessing we'll just be getting little tweaks like mission board alterations and trace drop increases, please. This will hopefully free up the team to add more unique missions to the game later on. The crisis kits are a lot of fun, and the tools at hand feel uniquely helpful depending on the level. The resonance system uniquely keeps players together, even better than you would see in Left 4 Dead. I think that was a really unique mechanic that I haven't seen in other games, so I appreciate that. I love the aesthetic of this game. The slapdash aesthetic fits nicely into the desperation of like the bureau staff situation. The new cosmetics look cool, even if it's a first-person game. I still think the cosmetics look cool, and the voice packs are a fun way to customize a first-person character. The elemental effects feel very unique, and I think they're really enjoyable to toy around with. I absolutely enjoy trying different builds, such as the melee fixed kit quick movement build, or you have a water zap then spread to enemies combo build. A new favorite is the never-ending ammo chain gun build, or the explosive freezing scatter gun secondary build. Lots of really cool ideas packed into this game in that regard. The music and the sound design feels like it's in a fantastic state. I love the audio cues for helping to find the corrupted altered items, so thank you for that. I really love the new guns on offer, especially the whole design of the scatter gun. I do hope the older guns will be brought up to balance, as I feel no real need to go back to most of them currently, except for the Lewis gun, I would say. The communication that Remedy has had with their community has been top-notch. They are always trying to address the copious amounts of feedback given to them, and their roadmap keeps getting updated, so thank you, Remedy. They haven't gotten greedy and moved on to the next project. Looking at player numbers and reviews, Remedy very easily could have cut their losses and gouged the player base they have to charge for the cosmetics before, moving on. But I appreciate that they chose to stick it out, at least for now, and improve their game. So that should always be praised. Things that would be really cool to see. If you want an ever-expanding list of unique game improvement ideas, I always like checking the FBC Firebreak Discord every so often under their feedback tab. These are just some of my suggestions. Adding a new perks and weapon mods would give longtime players some new things to put our resources into. Having different tools to switch around for each crisis kit would be a lot of fun. I picture something like an upward, firing rain down attachment for the splash kit, or like title shots that knock enemies back, or maybe an acid attachment to the water would be cool. A parachute would be cool for the launch kit and make that one less damage in air perk more viable as it slows your descent down, Attachable rebar spears with different elemental damages would really fit the jump kit as we remove that plate to attach that gnome already. Instead of a wrench for the fixed kit, we could get, and hear me out on this one, a hammer or a big stick. The opportunities are endless on that one. Increased trace drops would be lovely. I would really appreciate that. New enemy types we haven't seen before in Control. More maps. I think that's the big one, to be honest with you. I've seen people mention a hub area or hideout, which I agree would be really cool. I would love to see a push into some unique thresholds that had hiss break into them, and firebreakers need to quickly, make sure they don't spread or desperately lock them off from the rest of the Bureau, which that's kind of hardcore, condemning a whole solar system to die, and it feeds into the desperation of the Bureau members. So in conclusion, I am excited to see what an FBC Firebreak roguelike mode will look like and where they decide to take the trajectory of this game. I know that roguelike modes add a longevity to games like Hitman World of Assassination more recently. That was a really fun one. Although FBC Firebreak has its problems, I don't think I can judge it too harshly. It's a new team with a new director who has a more narrative background, creating the studio's first self-published live service multiplayer game. So it's a lot of firsts. I do wish that the management did more research on what it takes to support a game like this, and that more of the core systems were fully baked before launch. Earlier I mentioned there's been an update on Tiro Virtala, the CEO, and as I was making this video, a headline just came out that he is going to be stepping down as CEO of Remedy. So it's interesting timing, to say the least. I definitely think that FBC Firebreak's poor performance definitely had something to do with it. And whether it's going to be him completely moving away from the company or just stepping down to kind of appease shareholders, and maybe there'll be a restructuring. But it's an interesting thing to have occurred in the wake of all of this. And hopefully this will be the only change we see. Hopefully nobody else kind of loses their jobs, because normally that's what you see. You see CEOs and higher ups, nothing happens to them most of the time, and then there's these massive cuts to the front line, people who had nothing to do with the decisions. I don't know what this means for the future of FBC Firebreak, but it's a very interesting headline to come about. So this is definitely ongoing, so we'll see what happens. With that out of the way, back to our concluding thoughts to round out the video. I really don't think it was a good idea for Remedy to put this smaller indie-sized team to work on a game in a genre that's so demanding and competitive to begin with. I do think that in the time this game took to be made, live service games have gotten more of a skeptical eye from players, especially when you look at Sony's slate of failed games. I mean, they can still work, it's just that the market is obviously more saturated now. You have Concord that failed, Arc Raiders is a big one right now. I still think the core idea of FBC Firebreak is solid, and I like that Remedy is trying to push new ideas for their games on top of putting out the single player titles that make them popular. I also think they're getting closer to weaving in those new ideas into their greater narrative. I'd much prefer an FBC Firebreak to an Agents of Storm or a Crossfire X. I personally would love to see an XCOM style turn-based strategy game set in the control setting within the RCU. I feel like that would be a really strong fit, and if you want to see something close to that style, there's a third-person shooter in the XCOM series called The Bureau that is a shady top-secret government fighting aliens in the 60s plot. So it's perfectly aesthetic matching. I know I was harsh on FBC Firebreak, but as I said before, I am a die-hard Remedy fan, and I really want to see them succeed in all forms. I hope that the game keeps progressing and that they take the time to turn it into something really wonderful. Those are my thoughts on where FBC Firebreak is at after their first major update, Breakpoint, and thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.